Oh. Alright, hello all you crazy people out there, my name is Dragonite and welcome back to Harvest December. So in the last part, Marui's big sister came back and was rather disappointed that Marui had his powers back and had made a deal with Shiro. Anyway, in this part, it looks like we're back in school. Kohai, Mizuho, Marui, who is quickly becoming a classroom favorite, all yawned in unison. I imagined I could push a fist in their mouths. Oof. Mizuho made a funny noise and scrubbed at her eyes. It didn't help though because her eyelids fell regardless of her vigorous rubbing. Sorry, it's still early in the afternoon and all three of you are yawning already. That's terrible. You all need a healthier lifestyle. Eat properly and sleep properly. Speaking of eating, Masaki, I quickly whipped out a pair of disposable chopsticks and began to feed myself. We are in danger of divorce. Yuki was the same as ever. Please don't raise your voice, it's making my head hurt. You mentioned Marui-chan's sister is at your place now? Sine asked as she picked on her bento filled with yesterday's leftovers. Although the region had poor internet, rumors in Tagami town spread within a day using the surprisingly efficient old-school method, gossip. After Mayoi passed out, Mayori had panicked and called Dr. Manaka on emergency, causing the rumor to spread even faster. Well, since Maru is with us anyway, we thought it would be nice if siblings got to spend some time together after reuniting. But, it turned out to be a really sight-worthy situation, Kohai said with a sigh on his... Kohai said with what? With a sigh of his own. Alright, Yuki and Sine looked confused, so I briefed them about what had happened yesterday. I see. The efforts of 100 years all down the drain, Yuki surmised. Aw, poor thing, of course that's depressing. Yeah, but she's sighing every second. It's like she's got part of her soul hanging out of her mouth all the time now. And sometimes she suddenly goes into the fits of laughter. And sometimes she suddenly cries. Then other times she just has these angry outbursts. But despite that, she actually pays rent and is courteous to us all, so we can't really kick her out. I thought the gods would simply impose on you on their whim. Nah, I think that's just our god. Ours is good for nothing, Yuki said angrily. A blood vessel in her temple expanded, almost popping. Scary. Guessing from the fact that Mayoi owned a car, she was financially stable. Not surprising considering that Ao made a living modeling in Tokyo. I suspected she spent most of the money on the, tricky device she made, however. Wow, gods have souls too. Or was it a different sort of substance? I recalled a physicist writing about the God particle. Irrelevant now, I know, but it came up in my train of thought. Laugh all you want, but I can't even study properly for examinations with the situation at home. What am I supposed to do? Kohai began flipping through the flashcards he had in his hand. Kohai, your tea. Thanks. He took a cup Sine passed to him without looking up. They moved so easily together, as if they were an old couple. I looked at Sine and she just shrugged. But is Nene-sama going to be like that forever? With a sigh almost as heavy as his sister's, Marui dropped his eyes to his lap. He hadn't even touched his food. I'm sure it will get better in time. But we don't have any time. Yeah, the Toyama family is going to die soon if this continues. Isn't that a bit too dramatic? Even Mom, who has enough steel in her to punch Shiro-sama on the head with no reserve, is complaining about how she has a stomachache. I bet our hair is all going to go white by tomorrow. What? Alright, well, someone's mom, anyway. It's been so long since we've seen each other, but Nene-sama doesn't look like Marui at all. A large tear rolled down Marui's cheek and dropped into the lid of his lunchbox. Don't cry. Mizuho Nene-sama, what can I do to help Nene-sama turn back into her happy self? What can I do? What can you do? How? Isn't there a solution? A crying child wasn't something we could ignore. We'll think of something. Don't worry, we'll do something about it, so don't cry. Mizuho grabbed Marui's thin shoulders and shook him back and forth. How? Marui stopped crying, more from the shock of being shaken violently than from being convinced. How? That's... Is it not possible? Of course it is. They did this a few more times, and then, at times like this, I tried to duck. Misaki-san will come to the rescue. She grabbed hold of my shoulders before I could. Her tight grip told me I wasn't getting away anytime soon. Misaki-san? Yeah, of course. I mean, he helped us in January too, didn't he? You helped make Nene-sama better? Of course he will. Yuki nodded on my behalf. Wait a minute, Yuki? I'll lend you my husband for a while. Of course, we must cooperate to solve these problems of our hometown. Hey, where's my say in this? Thank you so much, Madoe beamed at me. I used all my power to prevent myself from changing my expression. If any bit of me expressed how I really felt, Madoe would notice and get depressed. So I looked up and took a deep breath. He looked so happy now. I wasn't about to change that. Kohai, can I visit after school? That is a telephone! Alright, that never happened. This room. Kohai and Mizuho stopped in front of a door. They rapped on it, then turned to look at me. No answer. Then they pressed their ears against the door and made a face. Kohai, are you ready? For what? The door opened. Ah! I felt my body bend back against my will. It was just a long sigh, but for some reason it had enough weight to it to make me feel like it had some solid substance. The Toyama siblings both looked at me and gave me a nod. Well, I guess I go in now. I held my breath and took a step into the room. Well, have fun getting to know each other. Hey! The door closed in front of my nose. Then the sound of the door locking. Hey, how come there's only a lock that works from the outside? What was this room used for? Hey, don't leave me here. Now I can study in peace, young sister. Oh ho ho! How wonderful, big brother. Hee hee hee. Damn you all. I could hear their footsteps fade away. Now I was imprisoned. Reality is merciless. Ha! It seemed like the other occupant felt the same way too. The place was filled with so much negativity the room looked almost haunted. Somehow, I thought my shoulders felt heavier. 100 years, 100 years. Do you know how far you can go in 100 light years with 100 years? Do you know how many generations can be born? Every day I worked with diligence. I neglected all play, vowing I would spend all my energy on a project until it got revenge. Well, yeah, maybe sometimes I went a bit crazy and made champagne towers with brandy and stuff. But then most of the time I spent everything on experiments and experiments on experiments and experiments on experiments on experiments. Do you know how many times I had to go on a tuna fisherman's boat because I needed the money? Before I knew, I had people calling me captain for my expertise. And then there was the time where I really had my own ship. And after all my time and effort, I'd come back in 100 years worth of hard work for my hands and run-ons. At long last, I understood why Kohai's mom, I couldn't get the details of what a tough cookie she is here, complained she thought she had a stomach ulcer. This woman was a suffocating mixture of depression and anger. I noticed something in her hand. Ah! Oh, hi. Mayoi looked up, seemingly genuinely surprised I was in her room. Oh, the pattern on this dagger? It's a rune for constraint. I suppose you could call it a charm, but it works more like an equation. She was in her business suit, sitting with her legs folded on a newspaper dotted with small mounds of wood shavings. She was carving a dagger with fluid movements. The blade glinted colorfully when it caught the light. A rune for constraint, something to take away or suppress a god's powers. I sat down beside her so I could watch her work. The wooden floor was hard and she gestured towards the cushion in the corner of the room. Correct. I was worried maybe we wouldn't be able to hold a conversation, but she answered while she concentrated on her work. Wow. Don't ask what was so difficult about that sentence. There are steps you must take to nullify God's powers. Initially, I thought I could do it just by force. I was arrogant to think so, but I've learned to do it properly. It's done in 3 steps. Capture, constrain, and nullify. Hey, you're human, aren't you? How did you know about the rune of constraint? I read it in a book. What's your name? Masaki Konno. Are you by any chance Takaki Kono's son? You know my father? Only as an author. She smiled a little as if we shared a secret. Her hands kept moving, even when she looked up at me. I read his book till it wore down. He's probably the only person who ever wrote a book specifically on power, or should I say authority gods have, and you experimented. The most complex part of the 3 steps is the movement before you take away a god's authority. The idea is to think about the authority as a process, not as a result. Gods have steps too, and the process in its entirety is what allows them to use the powers. I remember that part. The problem is that it isn't something you can describe in set form. Take, for example, water. It's liquid, but it can also turn into steam. Even the properties change. She continued her explanation using examples of ice, air, and chemical reactions. So, to put it simply, it is impossible to nullify God's authority with one simple equation. It changes shape when you try to capture it. Or it even changes its properties. The equations used in the runes aren't flexible. They only work in one way. And once you use one rune, it will never work against the same god again. Think of it as a virus. The god will develop an immunity to it. Father's books were all theoretical. But this woman before me was pushing it up to a practical level. I've never disliked people that went into extremes. They were worthy of respect as pioneers that tried to step into places where nobody ever went before. I was a realist, but I liked distancing myself from it too. Just slightly. I loved all things unreal. So, what would you do? I found myself asking. Develop an evolving rune. Mayoi was fast to reply. Do you remember when I ran Shira over with a car? Did you have runes on it? It was an experiment on my own part. I had runes written all over, both on the back and front of the car. I thought if just one of the runes could touch her, I could test the theory. That was a big risk you took. I almost laughed, imagining how she looked while scribbling all over her car. She probably did it with the same serious face she had on now. One of them must have successfully captured and constrained her, which was why I managed to hit her, sending her flying. I see. When Shira said she would run a car down before it hit her, she wasn't lying. The fact that Mayoi, I'm still doing it, was able to deal her some damage was proof that her theory did indeed work. Of course, there isn't a second chance. The more information the rune holds, the more powerful it is. That's why I chose my car as a medium. There's more surface to work on. And the reason you chose a gun? I could write a different rune on each rubber band, but there is a problem regarding the need for reloading. I think there are bigger problems than that. It's a chopstick gun. So I figured it would be necessary to develop an evolving rune. Why didn't you do it in the first place? I thought it would be pretty obvious to you. Because there is the problem for the mechanisms for calculation. It takes too much time. Mayoi quickly carved the dagger as she spoke. For a moment, I listened to the sound of wood shavings falling on the floor. She held the dagger before my eyes so I could take a better look at it. The surface was covered with intricate carvings of an unknown language. It could be numbers, but I couldn't tell. Watch. As she spoke, carvings began to move like a snake, reforming into a different pattern. It takes 1 minute for it to analyze its opponent and reform itself. Not very practical when you are in a fight when the situation changes by the second. Mayoi laughed bitterly. Could you attach something like a CPU to it to do the calculations? I'm sure that would make it calculate in time. But, do you really think it's a good idea to hit something with a computer? The thing will break just by swinging it around. She was right. I hadn't considered the fragility. Now I'm using the extremely ancient method of carving the equations by hand. And? Mayoi-san? What are we doing talking about this now? There isn't a reason to keep on doing this anymore. I should realize I'm useless and wasting all our time, damn it! She howled. Oh dear. I had hoped she wouldn't notice. I'm just gonna quit. I'm just gonna go get a job at the convenience store. I thought it was fascinating. Huh? Please, wipe your nose. I handed her a tissue. I liked hearing you talk about your theories. You don't have to lie. Theories on gods and weapons can't be fun. It isn't normal. Phoo. She trailed off weakly, depressed. Well then, I suppose I'm not normal. I nodded. So can I come again? You're a good guy. Huh? Masaki, you're a good guy. She grabbed hold of my hands. Then she gave me a handshake so violent my body shook up and down. You're welcome anytime. I'll tell you whatever I know, as long as you're interested. I smiled back. Please do. I'll make it entertaining. It's going to be the best show you've ever seen. You don't need to go that far. We talked for another hour after that. I opened the door. This chapter still isn't over? This is starting to go on for a while, too. The introduction was pretty long, but that's because it's the introduction, I assume. Anyway, the door was unlocked. Whoa, he's alive! And here I thought we would open the door on Friday just to honor him. God's sake! Excuse me a moment. I'm definitely gonna have to edit that out. And here I thought we would open the door on Friday just to honor him. I'm not rising anywhere. There really was the child of a god inside the room now. So, how was it? At least I know how to make her feel better in the meantime. I asked if they didn't mind me coming over to visit Mayoi-san frequently. What? They both gave their consent readily. But, I guess that means you haven't been able to find a real solution. No, I haven't. So what should we do? Think of something else. I'm not going to do this forever. I said as I pulled on my right ear. Mayuri had a tendency to raise her voice when she got excited about her theories, and my ears were throbbing by now. She needs direction, that's all. You mean a purpose in life? Yep. I'll come up with something. They both fell silent again. What's the matter? Well, you're kind of enthusiastic, which is really out of character. Don't tell me you're in love? No, I'm in awe. They tilted their heads with a frown at my reply. Oh boy, ow in the game. Well, this can wait for the next part. For now, I hope you all enjoyed that. My name is Dragonite, and I will see you all later.